Hello. Oh, there we go. Hi. Oh my God, that's our prop. So you guys know what book to buy at the end of this. It's called Dreaming Inside. Write it down. Hello, my name is Rudi Bremer. I'm a Gamilaroi woman with connections to Pilliga in northwest New South Wales, but I've grown up here in Sydney. I'm going to stick to my notes as much as possible because I'm not really used to talking in front of people. Today, we're here to talk about storytelling, and I don't think that I have to explain to anyone in this room how invaluable this art form is as a means of sharing ideas, teaching lessons, and telling your community the truth of who you are, or purely entertaining us. For 80,000 years, the Aboriginal people have been doing exactly that on this land. And that's one of the reasons why acknowledging country is such an important act. It's a reminder and a literal acknowledgement that even here in the heart of Sydney, we're on Aboriginal land. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we're gathered, the Gadigal peoples of Eora Nation. I pay my respects to elders past and present. I'd also like to acknowledge any other mob here today, and to non-Indigenous folks joining us, I offer this. More than 400 Indigenous people have died in police custody since the Royal Commission was held in 1991. According to the ABS, in 2020, just 2.8% of the Australian population identified as Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander, but Indigenous adults are 15 times more likely to be incarcerated than non-Indigenous peoples. And juveniles are 26 times more likely to be incarcerated. So, I say this because I want you to remember that being an ally takes action. It's important that you take some time to reflect on how you ensure that the justice system isn't a just us system. And now, I'd like to introduce my guests. Sitting next to me, I have Aunty Barbara Nicholson. She's an educator, a poet, and a champion of Indigenous writing. For the past 11 years, she's been facilitating a creative writing program at a correctional centre in the Riverina region. And this year, they celebrated the launch of their 10th published volume of Dreaming Inside. Here, prop. Joining her is Simon Luckhurst, the program coordinator and author of Eddie's Country. We also have Gamilaroi poet, educator and musician Luke Patterson. As well as being one of the program tutors, Luke is currently a Wheeler Centre Next Chapter Fellow and the Sydney Reviewer of Books Juncture Fellow. I think I got that right. So please join me in welcoming them. We're going to start off with a reading. So, Aunty Barbara.
Is that working? This is a little poem I wrote way back when, volume 3, whenever that was, if I could get a date. But what I do with the books, we do the writing workshops and we get the inmates to write and we publish their work. But I also ask all my tutors and whoever attends as a tutor on the day to also write a contribution for the next upcoming anthology. So this is what I wrote for volume 3. And it certainly reflects, this little poem certainly reflects what I see, my responses to the over-incarceration of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander men, women and children in Australia. And I call this Wings of Eagles. Within those harsh, forbidden walls, in full throat, they sing their songs, songs of dispossession, of injustice and brutality. They sing softly of longing and belonging, songs of hope, love, despair, of loved ones, of country and kin. they sing loudest of their dreamings. If I were a singer of songs, I would sing to them of many things. I would sing them sweet lullabies to soothe their fitful slumber, and to ease their troubled heart. I would sing of peace and love. I would sing them sunshine and moonbeams. If I were a singer of songs, I would sing them the wings of eagles to fly them to freedom. I wish I were a singer of songs.
Oh, that was beautiful. Thank you.
I can't hear you.
Sorry, I'm talking like quiet too. That was beautiful. Thank you. Aunty Barbara, I might get you to tell us how the program came about. What prompted you to start a creative writing?
All right, I'd been an educator in corrective services institutions, particularly in Goulburn Jail. Not for corrective services. I was employed by Southern Cross University in Lismore as an outreach educator for the outreach programs, which targeted a lot Aboriginal inmates in all prisons in New South Wales. And so they had at various times a number of inmates doing degree programs in that outreach section. And I was employed by Southern Cross to do one-on-one tutoring with those inmates in Goulburn Correctional Centre who were enrolled. And over the years I had I tutored a number of inmates, quite challenging in a way. Not the jail itself, that has its own challenges, but challenges in that there's very few facilities for anyone doing any study courses, particularly at tertiary level. It's just shockingly, painfully lacking in resources. And even for me to take printed material in for the inmates, that reference material that they might find useful in their study and writing their papers, it had to go through this huge process. So it was pretty challenging all around. But over time I got a number of them through degrees or close to it. One particular lad in particular, an amazing student, absolutely brilliant young man, and he was about 8 months off finishing his degree, and he got transferred to Junee Correctional Centre in the Riverina. It's a long way. Southern Cross University could not fund me. They didn't have the funds to take me to or facilitate me going to Junee, because that requires a couple of overnight stays in hotels and so on, plus long extended periods with a hire car. And they just didn't have the funds. So I took myself down to Junee on a number of occasions to get this lad through his degree, and I did. In the process, I made contact with the cultural programs officer there. And so fast forward from there to a couple of years, and I had the opportunity as a member of the South Coast Writers Centre in Wollongong to go back to Junee in NAIDOC week one year and with a team and conduct a series of creative writing workshops with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander inmates in the whole of NAIDOC week. So I gathered a team around me, and I had funds for myself and 4 others, and the 4th other could not attend, so that left me with a little bit of money. I had Bruce Pascoe, he came with us. We had John Burke from Wagga Wagga, and myself, and I needed someone to manage the finances, and my good colleague and dear friend here, Simon Luckhurst, who's a Gubberigine, he was at the time the treasurer on the board of the South Coast Writers Centre. So I knew he had a head for figures, and I don't. I have a numeric dyslexia because I had noughts all along. Anyway, so that doesn't go down well with the bank. Anyway, so I thought I'd better get someone who doesn't add noughts.
You could add some to my paycheck if you wanted.
If I had the wings of eagles, anyway. So Simon, I asked Simon to come on board because he could manage our finances. Now, we had a surplus from the little grant of $750, and we were driving down to Junee, and I happened to say to Simon, you know, the worst thing in the world that anyone can be is a bloody do-gooder. You go in and you do to jail and you do something with the inmates and you come out beating your breast saying, aren't I wonderful? You know, that's never going to happen for me. We go there, we do something. Those lads that gave up their time inside to accommodate what we were doing, we didn't know if they wanted to do that. They were going to accommodate what we were doing. So they needed to get something back. So I said to Simon, with that $750, would that get us a little desktop publication? We give it back to the boys. And he said, yeah, and there it is. And it's 38 pages long, and there's only half a dozen inmate contributors, because getting them to write something was worse than, you know, extracting impacted molars. So, you know, we had to coach and beg and squeeze and cajole and do everything and promise them the earth, nearly. But we got them to write a few things, but only half a dozen. And then I got all the tutors to write something, and I read that poem I just read. I wrote that, oh no, not that one, I wrote that another time later. But that was going to be the be-all and the end-all. We didn't have any vision at all that it was going to be any more than that. The interesting thing, the then coordinator of the South Coast Writers Centre was Rudi Vasilakis, and I worked extremely closely with her in shaping those handwritten contributions into something that looked like a book. And we were sending it off to the University of Wollongong Press, who were going to print it for us. And Ricky was about to press send after we thought we'd got something that looked like a book. She was about to press send, and I said, no, stop. She said, why? And I said, put volume 1 on that. And now we got volume 10. So
yeah, that deserves a round of applause.
So that's how it started, and I don't know, we had no idea we were ever going to get a second volume, but then we got volume 2, and then we got volume 3, and it's been something like Topsy. It's just grown and grown and grown, and we have 60 or so inmates nearly per volume, and over 200, up to 260 pages per volume. And the other thing, where's it? 9. Is it that one under that one? No, that one. The other thing is, one of the interesting things is that the inmate writers, they love it so much, they take ownership of it, and they have done. And so I'm so proud of them, because I think it's wonderful that they now own the books. And so much so that in 2020, when COVID hit hard and everything went into lockdown, there's no way we could get into the prison, so we're totally off bounds. And we've only been twice to the prison since 2020, and we go twice a year in May and October. But we couldn't do that in 2020, which was the year we did the work. We would do the workshops for volume 9. But what happened? The lads themselves said, we're going to do this, we're going to write these poems because this is our book and we want our book. That were their words. And they wrote and they wrote and they wrote, gave their material to the Cultural Programs Officer, who posted it up to us, and we got volume 9. I am so proud of that, without any workshop. And even so, probably about 1/3 of the inmate contributors in volume 9 were lads we'd never even seen before. They were newcomers to the jail that year, so we hadn't even seen them. The older lads were coaching them and bringing them on. What an impact that's had, you know, when the ones who've been in up to volumes 8 are taken on tutorial roles and teaching roles. I'm so proud of them. There's a lot to be proud of, and you know what? It shows their humanity. It really bespeaks their humanity, and I'm just so in awe of that they can separate themselves from criminality and show humanity. It's absolutely amazing. Yak on, don't I?
Well, Luke, so I was talking to Aunty Barbara earlier this year, and something she made very clear about the program is that this isn't a writing skills program. This is a creative writing program. As a tutor going into this space, how do you work to ensure that you are supporting creativity rather than worrying about spelling, grammar, the placement of the word on the page?
I'm a poet, so I don't really care about
Inherent.
that stuff anyway. No, I think and working with Indigenous students, not Indigenous students, working with these fellas here in the prisons and stuff like that, working with anybody, I kind of realized a little while ago the way that rules that we were taught in regards to how we speak and are meant to speak in certain places and stuff are kind of full of shit. And sometimes those rules get in the way of telling a good story. And so often the hardest part for me in that kind of context is just sort of identify, like half the time they're already telling stories. They're telling stories to each other, they're telling stories to me, they're telling stories to Aunt or whatever. Sometimes it's just like, all right, write it down. Like that's your story. Like the way you tell it, the way you're telling your brothers and stuff like that, like is already kind of beautiful. And I think Aunt tries to keep the integrity of that in the text of the book, I suppose. Yeah, in the structure and.
Aunt, do you want to tell me about the way that ethos translates on the page and how you work to transcribe exactly what's on the page and why?
Transcribing from the handwritten manuscript on scraps of paper, often on scraps of paper, but we do actually supply them with paper with a heading up the top that they've got to put their name on. But often we get scraps of paper. But the thing is, there's a lot of illiteracy among the inmates, and I don't edit that bad spelling and grammar out. It's their voice, and I will not allow tinkering with their voices. So all that bad spelling, the bad grammar is on the page, a burden on the reader. You have to really get into the mode. But it's there, but it bespeaks a lot of stuff, like it bespeaks essentially why they are where they are. They haven't had the education advantage. And of course, if you don't have education advantage, you don't have employment advantage, you therefore don't have purchasing power, you therefore seek alternative ways of surviving, which leads to criminality, right? And so, and finishes up, they are there because they're poor, because they didn't have that advantage. So, okay. But now to transcribe from that handwritten, very messy handwritten text requires quite a bit of diligence. Luke and I, and Luke's predecessor on this particular aspect of the process is Judy Morrison, and we spend hours going word for word over the text, and I'll read it out and spell it the way it's written, and Luke will type it up, etc. And then we cross-check that back that it's all done. So spell check is the transcriber's worst enemy. okay, because and not only that, but we sort of try to reproduce it exactly as they've written it. So they'll put a lot of uppercase letters in, throw in here and there for no reason other than they did. And some of them write songs, and they write the accompanying musical score with the notes, and to get those notes positioned above the words is a task. It's a bit of a chore, so that has to be mastered. It's a laborious process getting it from the print, from the handwritten to the printed page is a bit of labour intensive. But once it gets to the printed page, then we print that out and it comes back, and then it goes over it again and again, and then when I think it's good enough, I get it off. Simon gets it then to do the layout, and then he prints off the layout and gets it back to me, and I look at it and I put in all my corrections and amendments, whatever they are. And, you know, it doesn't matter how fastidious you are, you always miss something. So, like in volume 10, for example, the poem I submitted, my own for volume 10, we messed up the last stanza. Only gave half of it on one page and flicked the page over, and there's that same half again, but the first half isn't there. Anyway, things get past you. But it's a laborious process. I think it, but it's probably the biggest part of the edit that we do. Once we get it back in the print form, I really do give an eye for content, what might need to be edited out, like we can't accept pornography. I tell the lads, don't give me pornography, you know. We don't mind, you know, if they want to cut loose with the 4-letter words, that's their choice, not mine, and I don't care. We all know it in 10 languages anyway, so what's the difference? But we also have to be a little bit astute for plagiarism because they've never heard of it. And I mean, we've had submissions, you know, the 3 men in a boat story, where they went to sea in a pea green boat, that thing, you know, we've had 2 or 3 submissions of that. We've had submissions that were copies of Ujaru's poems, all sorts of things. So another part of the editorial process is looking clearly for what might be suspect plagiarism, and then doing an internet check to make sure. That's not to say they knew they were plagiarising. They've never heard of the word, right? So they don't know that. So we've been asking them to write poetry or life stories or something. So they write something down that they've copied out of text. They've written it. It's there on the page. So it's a bit of a story there. And then, so plagiarism part comes into it, but on top of that, we have to be astute for anything that we consider might have a victim impact. Because we've got to be very careful of that. There's legal obligations surrounding all that sort of stuff. I don't say we capture everyone, but we do capture some. So, and I do ask them, you know, not to, because we never know what their offence has been. We don't ask that. That's their business, not ours. But we do ask them, whatever they're writing, to be aware of anything that might incur the wrath of a victim of crime. So we don't try not to personalise it, but, you know, to just let them be aware. So, yeah, and you do have to be careful of that. So that's a bit of the editing process. Yeah.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add a little bit to that, just that with I helped the last time with the transcribing process, and Aunt doesn't do email, and she lives down the coast and all these things, and so I was like, oh, I've got to do this, and sitting there and starting to do it, in every single word. And I was like, there's a better way of doing this. I aren't going through every single word with me. And then sort of after a while, you have one of those moments where you're like, whoa, I'm in the midst of something intensely cultural. And it was like I was bearing witness. The fact that Aunt went through every single word with me and was like, how do you think like most holds the integrity of what this person is trying to say was pretty intense. Like every single word went through her mind. There's every single story. And then the pressure on me to get it right, which was pretty.
He's a dreamer who leaves words out.
Well, paragraphs, you said. Yeah.
And paragraphs.
Just every now and then.
Oh dear. But he's a beautiful dreamer.
But I think what this approach does as well is it allows for those words to have real power. They're the actual authentic words that were written by the person. In an ideal world, possibly we could provide editorial support for people who want to be a better poet and go in there and say, is this what you meant, or is there a better way you think you could say it? But we're not able to do that. We can't go back in. We can't ring someone up. So we allow those words to have authority and power on the page, and for those people to tell their stories as they tell them in their words, with their own heart and power behind that. So we acknowledge that.
And it shows the breadth of Aboriginal English and stuff like that when you put it all together. And you write about Aboriginal English and that kind of stuff in the introductions. And when you see it all together, it kind of, you get a good picture of it.
Well, I think it might be time for another poem. Simon, would you like to give us another reading?
Will you hit?
We hit, yeah. Oh, we were so organised.
Here we go. So this is a poem I wrote after the first visit, and I'm sorry you'll have to bear with me. As a poet, I'm a better novelist. And this is called This Time. So sometimes when you're in jail, there's something called a cert call, and that's a security team call. So there's a fight in the jail somewhere or something happens.
And they lock everything
And
down.
basically they lock the whole jail down. So wherever you happen to be in the jail that time, and there is a bit of movement going around the jail, you have to wait in that section until everything's cleared up, and then it all opens up again, and it's like...
And on that occasion, that was on volume 1, there was a cert call. On that occasion, we were actually locked up in the staff dining room. We had to stay there for 90 minutes until they cleared the incident. Yeah.
Anyway, this is called This Time. There's a cert call just as I get to the door, so I'm forced to wait and stare at the floor. This time, when I get out, I'm going to do it right. This time, find a job and stay clean every night. I said this after juvie, said it each lag since, said it as the truck approached the razor wire-topped fence. But something always stuffs me up and brings me back inside, no matter all my good intent and all the tears I've cried. But this time I will do it right. I'm getting older now. My daughter's eyes keep pleading for me to stay outside somehow. There's lads I know keep coming back. They say they miss the place, the warmth, the food, the clean pressed sheets, and Bobby's gawking face. But I miss the big sky over me, miss Debbie and the kids, miss the dog and silly things like my brother's wailing didge. The cert calls over, life returns, the gate is opened wide, the interruption to this day in my interrupted life. This time I will do it right. I won't be back inside. I'll pray and hope and try real hard. This time, this time, this time.
That's lovely.
And that was something that was constantly told to us. This time I'm not coming back. And often, as you saw it, they knew they would be back at some point too.
I'm going to ask you a question in a moment. I just remembered we will have time for questions at the end. Think about them. I'll give you Simon, you have been part of this program right from the start. How have you seen it evolve over the last 11 years?
It's been an extraordinary thing to be part of. When I got the phone call from Aunty Barb, she said, "Look, I'm having trouble finding another black fella to come. So you're the next best. Can you come with me?" Thank you. Okay, but that was an honour. And look, it was quite daunting going inside the jail, and all the jokes about it's not getting in, you need to worry about it's getting out, which we all managed to do that day. And being inside the prison environment was, as I said, it was daunting. It was unfamiliar to me. I'd visited places before, but I'd never been inside the actual jail area. The jail in Junee is quite unique. It has a huge cultural centre, which is just amazing. It's a basketball court, which has got floor-to-ceiling paintings on 3 of the walls.
On the floor.
And of every different style you can imagine. There's portraits, landscapes, abstracts. There's famous people. Just everything you can imagine. Just this. Some are attached. They're like framed and they're hung, and some are painted straight onto the wall.
Can I just interrupt there? Bruce Pascoe was with us on that first trip, and he described that cultural centre as the singing forest. It is just so beautiful. It's an oasis of beauty in that real harsh environment.
So we went in there, and we weren't really sure what to expect, I think, and there was a lot of trying to get prisoners encouraged, and they'd come and sit at the big round tables with us and write, and as Aunt pointed out, there was only about 6 who ended up writing things in that first book. And I didn't have much to do with the program over the next few years, other than I was in contact with Aunty Barbara occasionally, and I knew the program was going on, and I went to a couple of launches. With the book is launched every year in Wollongong, sort of an umbrella event of the Sydney Writers' Festival now. And so I knew it was growing. Then about, I think, volume 7, you invited me back.
Oh, is it that long?
Yeah, I think it was, maybe 4 or 7 anyway. So I went back again and went back in volume 8, I think. And by that time we'd got some funding, and she said, look, will you come on as like part-time coordinator? Which I was, again, really honoured to do, because I'd seen her strength in instigating the program, but then continual strength. Can I be a bit rude and reveal your age? Because I want to say this.
We were given very clear instructions not to get personal.
Okay, I won't reveal your age. I will say that this program, which has now lasted 10 years, was started by a then 75-year-old.
Who's now 87 and still doing it.
What do you say about that? That she puts all this passion and heart into this program and into supporting the inmates, and so many of them. And you talk about some poems, oh yeah, him, like blah blah blah, and she'll tell you the whole story, but she remembers who it was, and knows them, has a real intimate connection to these people. So that, I mean, I've seen the program grow, but I think I've seen just the amazing strength of character that you have. And again, this is someone, without revealing too much, you're not the wealthiest person in the world, right?
No, I'm
right.
shit poor.
This is someone, she doesn't get paid for this program. We cover her costs if she goes to Junee in terms of food and things like that. In fact, she frequently contributes to the program. If we have a speaking event like this one, her pay will come back into the program most of the time. So, I mean, I just think that's astounding as well. I mean, we're auspiced by the South Coast Writers' Centre to make sure that we have financial integrity and things like that. But I'll tell you, without that auspicing, we would have it anyway, because she would not have it any other way. So I guess I've seen a program that's grown. Being in this role, we've been fortunate. I've been successful in obtaining a couple of grants. So we had a small documentary that we were able to do during COVID. And now we've got funding to take the program into a new jail, Dilwinia Jail at Windsor, which is a women's jail.
This morning.
We already had the funding for that, but we had a meeting this morning with the Corrective Services Commissioner and the Deputy, and we're talking then and saying, so you're running a pilot program in Dilwinia? We went, yeah. He goes, oh, do you want to do 2? I think, oh, great. So we'll now expand into a second jail as well, so a third jail as well. So, in terms of seeing a program grow, it's like you said, it's grew like topsy initially. What we need to ensure is that the growth is not sort of out of control, that it maintains its integrity, and one of the most important aspects of that integrity is it's a culturally safe program.
Yeah, it's a grassroots initiative, and the lads would not. It's a grassroots initiative, and the inmates would not even bother being part of it if it had some bureaucratic structure as the governing body. They just won't do it. They even say that. I've had different inmates say to me, "This isn't a prison project, is it? This isn't a bloody government project, is it?" I get all these, no, this is grassroots. I started this, and blah, blah, and they say, "Oh, well, that's all right then," So it's simply because it is a grassroots project that they endorse it, they keep coming, and they want it to happen. Yeah. Sorry, you were talking.
No, that was thinking about this as a project that has been going for 10 years. We were talking just a moment ago in the green room, you guys didn't hear. We were talking about the kind of archival material that you have.
The what?
That your archive, your big boxes
our big boxes of archive material.
And I wonder, are you happy to talk about what you've been thinking in terms of how to keep hold of it, what to do with it?
Yeah, repository for the archival material. Simon and I have talked a lot because it's mounting in bulk, believe you me, it's mounting in bulk. Where it used to live at the South Coast Writers' Centre when their premises were on the university campus at Wollongong, which was accessible for us, very easy, but their premises are now in a northern suburb of Wollongong, which I can't access. So when that moved from the UOW to the northern suburbs premises happened, I took all of the archival material out and took it home. It's a burden to have it at home. You don't really have the facilities for it. So Simon and I have talked a fair bit about it, and look, the only place we'd feel really safe with it is at IATSIS in Canberra, because at least it's a blackfella place, and they would treat it with a due respect. But then that makes it not accessible to us if we wanted to delve into it. So it's a bit of an issue. And yeah, looking for a place for that archival material to live is another thing. We'd really, probably, ideally, we'd like to have our own premises somewhere, but even that's problematic, and there's cost factors involved, which we would need to have another 10 chook raffles for. So, yeah.
Well, the reason that I bring it up is because there are a lot of things to consider when it comes to the way that blackfellas engage with archival spaces, the way that we're represented in archives, in institutions like we are sitting in the State Library. So I personally am always interested in this question of sort of, who are our archives, because often for blackfellas, our elders are our archives. Somewhat like you, Aunt, would be.
Where are you going to put me?
This is a question, eh?
Oh dear.
So, but anyway, it was a thought that I had, and I thought I'd just put it out there.
There's probably. I do. Look, I live in Wollongong, so for me, it'd be useful to have a home for those things handy to where I live. You see that thing there, that means I can't drive very far anymore, and I probably won't be long before I won't be able to drive at all. But so it'd be really good to have it close by, I suppose. But you think of local libraries, local community centres, or local arts groups and things like that. It's always a problem. It's always a problem. Yeah, you can talk up on that.
I'm not going to speak to Aboriginal culture in terms of archiving. I think that's a problematic thing anyway, because of the nature of archiving and how you get something to last. Ironically, perhaps, it turns out that books may be one of the best things we have to preserve things in the long term, with changes in formats and things like that. But yeah, that's all I'll say on that.
Yeah. I know there's been talk of digitalising it all, but that puts it into another space where it can be tampered with. Anyone who's smart enough to, scam New South Wales government transport and get all their details of all their clients, Transport New South, and I know that haven't, because I've had letters from Transport New South Wales to that effect. Go change all your account numbers, blah, blah, because they got scammed, right, with all the data. So, and I think that material needs to be protected. It doesn't belong to anyone else but the authors. And, I'm very protective of their ownership and their rights in copyright as well. Yeah. It's a tricky one. If anyone's got the magic answer, please.
Luke, would you like to read a poem for us as well?
Read it out loud, Luke. Yeah. What are you going to read?
I'll read my usual go-to. I won't read mine. Kenneth Jones. He does it.
Yeah, okay. And read that one in there from Jerome too.
And Jerome's?
Because that speaks to what we've been saying.
Yeah. Is it in this one? I think it's in this one.
I think it's in.
It's in the end.
This is a poem by one of the inmates, Kenneth Jones. It's called The Serpent Snake Knowledge. Aboriginal trade routes across country moving, along river, gravity shift, pulling giant cod from the water. I went to a burial site where the river passed. What is said from story, not just mine, shared colours inside our eyes, not just from my experience, sent down generation in your blood, handed down in time. We learned that we the ones changing the universe, all of us supernova become. Yeah, so that was one of the inmate poems.
Yeah, this one that Luke's about to read, the one that Luke's about to read was written by Jerome Broden. Jerome is the Cultural Programs Officer at the jail who supported us right from day one and been absolutely amazing. He's a Samoan man and strongly cultural himself, right? And he does an amazing job there.
And just if you can picture a prison officer walking around a jail with dreadlocks down to here, it'll help.
So Jerome's poem is showing some love. It's called Aunty Barb. They love her, respect her. Aunty Barb, they call her. They remember her and she remembers them, every one of them. Those who have come before and come back, moved on but never really leave. That place does that to everyone. Them, to her, and even me. But why does she do it? Year after year, volunteers her time. Greetings of tears of joy and sadness. Farewell hugs of hope and forgiveness. There's not enough people like Aunty Barb in this world. Cultural, political, inspirational. I'm privileged to have known her, honoured to have worked for her, and all the better for when I'm asked, what good did you do in your time here? And I'd say, well, I had a small role in the Dreaming Inside editions with this Waddy Waddy woman who went to Wagga Wagga, Wiradjuri land. Have you heard of her? Aunty Barb, we call her.
Yeah, look, I think that's a really endorses what Luke was talking about earlier, about the lads and how they have, when we're doing the transcripts that I read every word, and that's exactly what Jerome is saying, isn't it? Yeah.
One of my favourite first memories of going in, first moment, walking into the room and seeing a whole bunch of tough brothers with like tats and scars and shit like that run across the room, like knocking each other to grab on a chair. It was just this really beautiful moment. Like I was like, this is yeah. It was super cute.
Getting hugs everywhere.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is, there's rules about having not having physical contact with inmates when you go into a jail. You're not supposed to have physical contacts. Well, all of the guards just turn their head while the inmates rush up, and they do, don't they? They rush up and we get the biggest hugs and loves, So no one worries about it. They've kept letting us come back, so that's a good thing. So,
I think we can start opening up to, thank you. We've just got 15 minutes left, so we're going to start opening it up to questions from you fellas, if you've got
Better get a
them.
roving mic.
I think there is a mic that's going to start coming around. Right here in the front, we've got one.
Have you got a roving mic?
They do.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hi. I was just wondering about the position of libraries in correctional centres and whether there's funding, because I would imagine you were talking earlier, Aunty, about trying to have further education. You don't have libraries.
Oh, look, it depends what jail you go to. If you go to Goulburn Jail, the only books in the library there are the discards from the police academy, and the only books the police academy had were discards from every other junior library in the state, right? So it's absolutely appalling. Plus, they have absolutely no system at all at Goulburn Jail. Different jails have got different things. Junee Jail has actually got a trained librarian and who has set up the library there in a proper Dewey Decimal System. He trains inmates in library skills, library management and techniques and everything, even to preserving damaged books and so on. And just as a little aside, I might tell you that we always leave a dozen of the books every year at the library, and then the boys come and borrow them, and they don't come back because they come and borrow them and then send them home to family. So what the librarian does now, he photocopies them and puts them into a spiral-bound folder contraption thing, because the lads can't post out spiral binds, right? So I don't mind. I think it's wonderful that they are sending the books home to family, right? I think that's amazing. You know what? They get a joy out of it, and they're sending the books on. So good luck to them. That's an aside.
So is it a bit like schools, where it depends on the budget? Like the school principal can decide how much is spent in a library or on their library. Is it the same sort of thing within each centre?
We can't speak to all jails in New South Wales, but I certainly can talk to a conversation I had with John Valance, the state librarian, this morning, where he was in Silverwater Jail, and there was a library there, but the inmates weren't allowed to access it. So, but I can also speak to a conversation I had with Michael Duffy this morning. He's a communications director with Corrective Services, and there's a plan now to roll out 6,000 tablets across jails in New South Wales. So prisoners will have access to a certain number of books that they'll be able to have in their cells and access via tablets. So it won't replace the need for a real library where people can go and browse and pick up something and have a look through. But it's a way to have a form of communication that people can access and use.
And can I just say, those tablets are only for internal in the jail use. They don't have outside connectivity. Okay, so inmates are never ever going to be able to use internet facilities to reach outside of the prison. Not at all. That won't ever happen.
I just kind of jumping off this conversation about access to other books. Have you seen in being part of this creative writing work, have you seen the relationship between the inmates, the inmates' relationship to literature change? Have you seen it develop?
It's a good question, and I think the short answer is no, simply because we don't see the same inmates time after time. They might be gone, moved on. There's a few who have been long term, and we've seen them over a number of years, but generally speaking, we don't see them time after time. We do every week. We're there 2 weeks a year for tuna. We're in the jail for 2.5 days. We do 5 separate workshops. We might not see the same inmate in more than one workshop, right? So we don't have time to do anything other than gather the very raw material that they've written. no time to skill them up or to assess for that question. But it's a really good question, and I wish we could find out, but there's no way we can. Yeah, but there's there's a lady wants a question. Oh, okay. We've had a couple of inmates who were there fairly much long term. One was, I guess I can say their names now because it's a long time, Chrissy Gibbs. He was in our very first workshop, and he was there for 2 or 3 after. And Chrissy was pretty much, by the time he left the jail, he was pretty much okay. He'd actually done, Junee Correctional Centre has, Riverina TAFE has an on-site mini campus at Junee Correctional Centre where they teach a few things. Metal work is one of them, and a couple of other things, like personal trainer. And Chrissy did this personal training course with TAFE there, and he passed it. I remember being there on pretty much his last time we saw him there, and we're in this big cultural centre, and he had a group of inmates that he was actually their personal trainer. So it was really good. He got out and he got a job as an assistant in a gymnasium, outside gymnasium, doing personal training. We never heard of him since. He's never been back inside since. I think we helped in his case, not to the same extent as the next fellow, who was Matty Merritt. Matty's a Wagga Wagga lad, and he was with us for a number of years. I think he's in 4 or 5 of our books, and he did. When I first met Matty, on the very first occasion, he was, reluctant to pick up pen, and so I'm trying to tease him out and draw him a bit to get thinking about the fact that if you can tell a story, you can write. That story can be written if it can be told, and he was very reluctant. And I said, well, I thought I'd change tack. Where do you want to be when you get out of here? And he said, oh, I'm coming back. And I thought, oh, okay. Why would you do that? Well, 3 meals a day, bed at night. Don't have any bills, don't have to pay tax, don't do this, don't have that worry, don't have any responsibility. So I'll come back. And I thought, oh dear, that's total institutionalisation, and they just don't know it. I mean, he'd had a lifetime of being in and out of juvenile justice and so on, so anyway, like I say, he's with us. I eventually got him writing, and he did contribute to a book a year for all the time he was there. And the last year he was there, and we knew he was getting out soon. He'd also started a TAFE course there doing metalwork, and in the last 6 months of his time in pre-release programs from Junee Correctional Centre, they let him do work outside of the jail at the abattoirs at Junee. So he was on day release to do that work there, and they used to take him in the truck every morning to go down, and then go and pick him up. And then he become so trustworthy, they let him get a cab back to the jail in the afternoon, and he was all right, and he never failed, and he was doing good. And his TAFE course was finished that year, and Riverina TAFE has a lot of TAFE colleges throughout the Riverina, in Griffith and Narrandera and Wagga Wagga and Junee and Temora and various other places around there that got TAFE colleges and so on. Matty won Riverina TAFE Student of the Year, right? There was a big presentation night in Wagga, and the correctional officers, that was the ones that we have, that was Jerome and their other colleague down there, Trevor Coles, who was a rehabilitation and reintegration officer. They escorted Matty to Wagga for the presentation night from the TAFE, and he was absolutely overwhelmed, and they let him wear clothes, not prison greens, and that really is a good thing for him, boost to the morale, etc. And he was asked to acknowledge and say a few words on receipt of the award. and he was asked, what was the motivation, and his own enthusiasm. He stated that he was so empowered by doing our classes down there that really enthused him to work hard at the TAFE course. And so, I mean, okay, I think I totally reject us taking the credit for what he did. He did it. We might have been an inspirational tool, but he did the work. But that's the value of the project, that it can have that effect on people. Can I tell you, I think I'm at the Sydney Crime Fiction Writers Festival. There's a wealth of material in there that might inspire you. A huge amount. There's a huge amount of material in there. I think I'll take up crime fiction. And I've got a question for you people. Why are so many crime fiction writers women? You outnumber the blokes. I've been counting. But anyway, that's a question you can tell me later.
I did want to add to that as well, where you're saying we don't want to take credit. And what I realize as well, a lot of them are already really talented musicians and rappers and like gifted with the spoken word as it is. The disconnect is partly the history of education that's like left us out for being able to communicate those ideas in the like most, sanctioned and like thumbs up, educational approved kind of way. Like they're already very talented when it comes to storytelling and music. Like some of them have like iTunes, they sell their music on iTunes and all that kind of stuff. Like they're very talented.
They'd love it if we could take in the technology. We're just not allowed. You can't take a smartwatch in there, you can't take phones, you can't take anything that smacks of technology into the jail at all. And there's very rigid screening procedures. Which get more and more technologically advanced every year. So you can't do anything now without it bipping. The underwire in your bra will bip.
Which I think prompted that lovely comment from you as we were trying to get in one morning.
What was that?
Well, it's not usually this hard for a black fella to get in jail.
Yeah, we'd had a lot of trouble trying to get into the jail that morning, so clearly the comment had to come out, didn't it? I'd forgotten that, Simon.
Yeah, sure. I don't want to interrupt though, because I love listening to you. You're just fabulous. You really are. And props to you. I worked in the system for a really long time, and I'm just wondering, and it's a pretty boring question, 2 questions actually. Do you think there's something about the fact that Junee is a private prison that allows this sort of latitude that you have in doing the programs you have? Because I don't think there's anybody that is doing anything like that in the state-run prisons since
the hopeful answer would be that it wasn't. But the reality is that yes, it is. I didn't say that. You didn't hear that. No, I think it definitely is, because there's a philosophy behind the administration of that. Junee Correctional Centre is owned by the worldwide corporation known as GEO, and I forget what that stands for. Do you remember? No, okay, it doesn't matter. GEO is owned by the Mormon Church in Utah, right? There's no sense at all of it being a conversion place. Yeah. Not at all. You don't hear anything about that. In all the years we've been going there, I've never heard one word said about Utah, right? But the philosophy, and they used to own Parkleigh Prison in Western Sydney too. I think, I'm not sure if they do now, but they own there's another prison in Victoria they own, and they've got a number throughout the Pacific Basin Islands and in Africa and so on and so on. But I think their overriding philosophy is more in line with pastoral care, and so on. Now, that's not to say that it's 100% or it's wonderful. It falls short of being wonderful, but it's better than most.
Yeah,
right?
So I think the other thing is
certainly better than state prisons, I can assure you.
And you've got medium security prisoners as well. I think that's the other thing that perhaps
Yeah,
you
some of them are
mentioned.
medium security. The one in Junee is just put on a whole maximum security wing now.
I have
Yeah.
another more legally
Yeah.
sort of question, I suppose, as someone who's practiced a lot in the parole jurisdiction and been reading a lot about remorse, and the courts are now using social media to argue to basically say you're not sorry for what you did because of this post that you did on Facebook the other day. Is there a possibility that something somebody might write in one of these volumes might be used against them in parole?
Is there a possibility that what someone writes will be used against them?
Good point. Very good point. We do, we have a responsibility to every class that comes in, every session, to advise them of the mandatory requirements imbued on us is to report anything that smacks of crime or offences committed that haven't been discovered and they haven't been arrested for, charged or anything. So we're, mandatory reporting, I always remind them, don't tell me about anything that you might have done that you've got away with. I've got to talk to them in the language we understand. They understand this. The thing is, we are bound to report, particularly if it's an offence that might carry a sentence exceeding a 5-year sentence. So like a serious crime in particular, but not to exclude others. So I just ask you, if you've done anything that you've never been caught for, don't talk to us about it. So we try to insulate ourselves against that, but it's a really good question, and thank you for it. Yeah. That's it.
It is. We are right on time. So I would like to ask you to thank Aunty Barb, Simon, and Luke.